You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Sick of those trivia podcasts that you don't even understand how to operate and they just have too many levers and buttons?
There's got to be a better way.
Now there is, with Good Job Brain, an offbeat quiz show and trivia podcast that makes learning new things easy and fun.
I just learned that artificial vanilla flavoring sometimes comes from the anal glands of a beaver, and now I can never shake that mental image. Thanks, Good Job Brain.
Good Job Brain is available for the low price of just 4 easy payments of free. It's a podcast.
Good Job Brain is part of Airwave Media and available on all podcast apps. Operators are standing by.
Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
Hey, amigo! That's Sabata!
A rifle that never misses. A pistol that shoots 2 ways. And a look that means you're dead before you draw. The man and the gun are one, called Sabata.
Hey, amigo! That's Sabata!
Welcome to the projection booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me once again is Ms. Heather Drain.
Hello, hello.
Also back in the booth is Mr. Mark Begley.
Hey friend, it's Begley. You're finished.
Spaghetti Western Month continues with a look at the Sabata films. It's something of a trilogy, but not really. Some might say that there are 7 films in the series, but really, they're just kind of 2, and we'll unpack all of that stuff as we go along. The original film, Hey Friend, It's Sabata, You're Finished, or just Sabata, was written and directed by Gianfranco Parolini and released in 1969. The film stars Lee Van Cleef as the titular gunfighter who's no stranger to gadgets. He moseys into a place where the town's power brokers have set up a robbery of their own money in order to collect the insurance. Sabata begins to extort these pillars of society with the help of a Mexican lout, Garincha, or Carincha, depends on what your subtitles are saying, a Native American acrobat named Alley Cat, and a former friend-turned-rival, a frenemy, I suppose, named Banjo. We will be spoiling this film and some of the others as we go along, so if you haven't seen Sabata, turn off the show and come back after you have. We will still be here. Heather, had you seen the Sabata films before?
That was kind of filed under the category of films I had read about for years and heard about, and was always curious to kind of check out, especially because spaghetti western, I know some of the bigger titles, and of course I love El Grande Silencio. This year was my time, thanks to investigate the Sabata films, and the first one, I was pleased as punch. I know we'll go further into it, but I thought it was so much fun. Lee Van Cleef is, in fact, the man. And this is one of my new favorite Lee Van Cleef roles. Like, he just owns it like a custom-made leather suit.
And Mark, how about yourself? Sabata friendly?
This was my first time watching any of these. You may have shown one on a movie night.
I did.
Okay. I didn't see all of it. I believe when I watched, was it the first one?
It was.
There were a few familiar scenes, and a lot of times I have to kind of cut in and out on those nights, and I miss certain things, and I couldn't quite tell if it was this or a different spaghetti western.
And now after you've seen 7 movies, they all kind of run together, don't they?
That is one of the problems with watching all of these, yes.
And then me, like a genius, I went and I bought the Sartana box set, not the Sabata box set, because Sartana, same writer, Gianfranco Parolini, and Sabata was kind of his response to Sartana. Like, he couldn't make another Sartana film, so he said, oh, I'm going to do my own thing and make Sabata. And this was not my first time with the first Sabata film, but definitely my first time with all of the rest of these films, including the amazing third film, which I'm very excited to talk to you all about. Lee Van Cleef. Oh my God. You know, for a few dollars more is my favorite of the Leone Dollars trilogy. I can't say it's my favorite Leone overall. That's probably Once Upon a Time in the West. But Lee Van Cleef is the reason why I love For a Few Dollars More so much. And this Colonel Mortimer character that he plays in that movie, so similar to Sabata, especially the whole idea of the gun with the long handle so he can take care of stuff from long distance, and he uses that pretty quickly in this movie, so I was very happy about that. Same kind of outfit and everything too, and just Lee Van Cleef exudes cool like nobody's business.
He is so amazing in this, and he has like such a great kind of sense of humor with his swagger. Like, he's always kind of walking around with this almost like, not quite a smirk, but he's just kind of bemused. You know, it's like people try to constantly betray him and one-up him, and he knows he's got it. Like, he knows he's cool. He's just got that presence of just like, he is the man. He knows he's the man. He's going to show you why he's the man. And also, I mean, at times he's almost like supernaturally talented. Like, he just, I mean, especially the third one, at one point he's just popping up like a monster. Like, you think the guy's running from, and all of a sudden there's Sabata, but he pulls it off. Like, that's kind of the thing, is like, there's so many things in these films. Like, if you're a viewer that likes to live in a land of logic where everything makes sense, you do not need to watch these movies. But to me, that's kind of like part of it. There's like sort of a weird magic, especially with this one and the third one.
He dies in both of those movies and comes back from the dead in each one of them.
I'm not that familiar with a lot of his work, even in the spaghetti western genre, but of what I have seen, I've never seen him be as, I mean, funny, for lack of a better word. It was interesting to note that it wasn't just serious, squinty eyes, I'm going to kill everybody through all the films, or, well, through his 2 films that he's in. And I really enjoyed that. I liked that he was a little more mischievous, I guess. And I was glad that he was back in the third. I don't have anything against Yul Brynner, and I actually like the second one pretty well. But I was happy in watching Return of Sabata to have him back.
Once you see him as Sabata, it's almost like, it's like when you see a band, like a rock band you love, have a new lead singer and it just doesn't work. You know, you're like, that's not Jim Morrison. That's Ian Astbury from The Cold. And it's like, yeah, I mean, Yul Brynner's great. Ian Astbury's great. He's not Jim Morrison. Like, there's, to me, it's like, in my mind, Sabata is 120% Lee Van Cleef. And we'll go more into the second one here in a little bit too, obviously.
He does have this colorful band of characters, but even Sabata just himself, even if he was alone, he reminds me a lot of, well, of course he reminds me a lot of like, The Man with No Name, as far as that idea, or Yojimbo, the inspiration, that idea of that he knows everything that's going on and doesn't really need to figure anything out. He's kind of like Columbo. Like, when this robbery happens and he goes out and he kills all of the robbers that took this money from the bank and brings everything back, and he's just like, hey, here's all the money, isn't this great? It's like he immediately sniffs out something's not right, and he pretty much can put his finger right on the pulse. And I just love that. And so much of this it is very Yojimbo / Fistful of Dollars-esque for me, as far as him going, oh yeah, well, I'm looking for a reward. And I think he starts at $5,000, and then pretty much he starts extorting all of these pillars of the community until he gets up to like $60,000. And I think the original total that was stolen was $100,000. So he just keeps raising that asking price. Like, if you want to keep my mouth shut, let's talk about a little bit more money. How about 10,000? How about 20,000? And then, now he's got these other guys where he's going to split that money with them. Karencha, who is, I love him so much. And Alley Cat, who never says a word, but he bounces around like a friggin' tennis ball. And then Banjo, this William Berger character, who just constantly hanging around, kind of like harmonica in Once Upon a Time in the West, hanging around, playing that banjo. And there's history between the two of them, but I don't think we ever really get the whole story. But I just love that they're fucking with each other the entire movie.
I think we cannot heap enough praise on Ignacio Spallo as Carintia, who's kind of like the guardian angel of all three films. Like, he's in, of course, these films share so many of the same actors, and almost everybody's playing a different role except Lee Van Cleef. But he's got this he's got this great, like, big, almost like, I don't know, Falstaff? I don't know, energy? It's just, he's so much fun and just so gregarious, and his laugh. He's got this like laugh. That's just, he's fantastic.
You were mentioning, Mike, how Sabata seems to be 3 or 4 steps ahead of everybody. And I had read, I think in one of the pieces that you sent, that the director was fascinated by chess. That really great scene in the film where that plays out visually between Sabata and the main baddie in this, Stingle. I'm going to try and keep names. I think that's the baddie in this one. Trying to keep names straight here. Who the actor reminded me of William Finley the whole time I was watching the movie. I was like, there's something about that guy's eyes that reminds me of De Palma's little friend that shows up in all his movies. But I just love that scene at his dinner table when they're moving. Each of them is moving the wine, and he's got that cane that shoots something out of it, and Zapata obviously knows that, and he's moving the bottle here and the plate there, and it just goes to that whole thing of he knows what's going on 3-4 steps ahead, which you have to in a game of chess.
Because there's the other two baddies. So there's the judge, the banker, and the rancher. And the rancher is Stengel. And the judge and the banker, I mean, you can almost just forget about those guys. They just kind of represent the money and the power of the city. But Stengel is really the power behind the throne. And he is a great match for Sabata because, like Sabata, he loves gadgets. And you mentioned his cane that shoots out, I guess, like spikes or knives or something. He also has this room in his ranch house where the ranch house, which is just this incredible palace, is actually like the Via de Mussolini, right? Where Mussolini spent his summer months. And he's got this big room, and there are these two like metal cutouts of men, and he has these very elaborate duels that take place behind each of them, and there's a secret hole in the heart of the one that he stands behind, so he can use either a gun or that cane to shoot at his opponent that way. But again, Sabata knows exactly what's up with all of this stuff. And yeah, I love that dinner scene when he is moving those big flasks to block that cane. And yeah, it's very much like a long distance chess match with objects on the table. It's fantastic.
Dingle has this kind of like, he's almost like a spider playing with his prey. He has this kind of like coolness about him. And like, he even has like this line about, life is only worth living when you can face death with no fear.
I always thought you couldn't know life until you fucked death in the gallbladder.
Well, that's actually my own personal favorite line.
Oh, okay. Your own philosophy?
Team Udo Kier and Paul Morrissey all the way. Of all of the three main films, I think Stingle is the best. I mean, for the reasons both of you have mentioned, I think he's the best villain because he really is such a great foil for Sabata.
None of the other ones measure up as far as sheer scuzziness. I like his line about, I don't know if it's a Marxist line, where I had just watched Rope the other day, and they say it's kind of a similar thing. Like, this kind of stuff is okay for people of superior intellect, and everyone else is at my bidding, and that sums him up perfectly.
I read an article where they were talking about a book that he's reading, and it's basically the philosophy of that book is what he's quoting, as far as like he's that upper echelon. He's the, the Nietzschean Superman is how he views himself, and he views everyone else below him, and he's basically trying to find maybe his equal. And then I read another review where they said that he's a homosexual, and I wasn't really getting that he was coded homosexual, and I know homosexuality is one of those things that comes up in some of these spaghetti westerns, one of my favorite being one of the Django movies where you've got this whole gang of homosexuals, but I didn't really see Stengel as gay. I don't know if you guys picked up on that one or not, if I just completely missed it.
I didn't pick up on it, but I'm not super well versed in spaghetti westerns overall, but a lot of times that bad guy, who looks like he came from the big city, is portrayed effeminately by their clothes, maybe by their hair. Kind of looks like he might have eyeliner on. But, when you mention that, I think I had read something that there was supposed to be this question about Sabata and Banjo. And I totally missed out on it the first time I watched it. And the only thing that implied that in the movie that I caught the second time was, I believe it's Sabata says, "We used to play together." That was like the only indication of how they knew each other. They've obviously got history like you've mentioned. And there's somebody from Sabata's past in all the films that serves as a foil. And that line, I was like, oh, I guess that's what they were talking about. Because he says it kind of oddly, and it's not explained in any depth whatsoever. So that's really the only homosexual coding I caught, if that's even what they were going for.
I'm not really buying that. The thing is, with Stengel, is he's kind of a dandy comparatively to sort of the scruffier townspeople, which I think kind of making a character a dandy can be a great way to kind of show them to be a little villainous. He's not a man of the people or anything. But yeah, as far as any coded gay, I don't see it at all. If anything, especially with Banjo, I think he's a total just poon hound. But speaking of Banjo, how great is Banjo?
I fucking love Banjo. And that scene that Parolini just, I wouldn't say over-direct, because it is just fucking fantastic. When he's going from Banjo's face to the banjo, back to the face, back to the banjo. And it's all just these kind of it's not even a swish pan. It's just this, just swish tilt, I guess it is, of the banjo back to the face, back to the banjo, back to the face. And then when, and it just keeps getting faster and faster and faster. And then finally Sabata shoots the banjo and he's just like, "You're out of tempo."
This may be my own sort of Mike is very well informed of my own personal bias, fangirlness of Charles Rocket. Did he kind of remind you of Charles Rocket a little bit in this?
That's who I was thinking of. Yes, thank you.
Okay, at least it wasn't just me, because I kept being like, man, I like the cut of his jib, and I'm like, midway, I'm like, holy shit, I know why I do, because he reminds me of Charles Rocket.
That is so funny. I was like, his facial features, if you put a wig on whoever it is I'm thinking of, that's the guy, and I couldn't remember his name. That is exactly it. It's funny, I watched Sartana, the first one, today, Mike. You mentioned that earlier. And I do believe it's the same director going as Frank Kramer as the Sabata films. William Berger is in that, and he's got a little bit meatier role, so you might want to check that one out. It's pretty fun.
Duly noted. He's so, and even his pants, he's got these pants with this great fringe that has little bells, so he's always kind of jingling wherever he goes.
Yeah, usually it's the spurs that jingle jangle, but he's all about that. I mean, it's literally bell bottoms.
And Yul Brynner's got some fancy duds in the second one, which we'll get to eventually, but talk about bell bottoms.
The fact that we have one of the greatest reveals ever with his musical instrument of choice. And especially because leading up to, you can kind of tell a lot of people are very they don't take him seriously. They kind of think, even his lover, is just like, sort of just like, doesn't take, look at you with this instrument, kind of attitude. Midway, the banjo's a gun. That is so awesome. And the fact that they kind of built it up, because, early on you keep expecting, is it going to be a gun? Because you've already seen Sabata with his like insano sort of gun that can shoot from different ends and all this, but, but he doesn't use it. And so they save it just, till the midway point. And then, so when he does reveal it, it's like, oh yes, the greatest reveal.
And you're talking about the history between those two, and I kept thinking that it was probably something to do with the war, because I think Garancha keeps saying that he was a war hero, and this seems like it's set just a little bit past the Civil War, and is one of those, like, I can really see Stengel being a war profiteer, and I can see, like, was Sabata, which side was he on, and was he doing right by the war, or was he a soldier? Was he a colonel, like Colonel Mortimer? Like, what is his story? And I kept thinking there was something there with Banjo and him, maybe even being on opposite sides.
That's the impression I got, and I don't know if that was just from reading one of the articles that you sent, or maybe even just the Wikipedia page, but it's not explicit in the film, but that was my understanding. That's what I went into the film with. And also, having read a little bit prior to watching the films, I had that hidden shotgun or hidden rifle in the banjo sort of ruined for me, because I knew that and I kept going, well, when is he going to start shooting people? So it was still a nice reveal when it happened, but it had kind of been spoiled for me. But in all of the films, there is some relation to the Sabata character to the Civil War, as far as, time and place for the films.
That's what it feels like, yeah. Especially in these first three.
Yeah, the first three, yeah.
Yeah.
The unofficial ones, I don't know. Those were all over the place, so.
The first time I watched this, it was one of those where I just didn't really catch everything that was going on. And so especially like the Alley Cat character, I was just like, who the fuck is this guy? Because it's not just Alley Cat that is there. But I love his reveal when he's up on the roof, like Fiddler on the roof, and he jumps off of it and bounces, like they're obviously hidden trampolines, right? But he just bounces and bounces again and then lands, and he's just, there he is. And there's also acrobats when it comes to the actual robbery itself. And these guys are there just like, this guy stands on a piece of wood and this other guy jumps on it, and then this guy flies up there. And it was just like, wow, this is amazing, all this acrobatics that are going on. But that is nothing compared to the third film, which is a literal fucking circus.
That was interesting. I missed that the first time watching the first film, and they had the coach with the Virginia Brothers flag on it, and they kept mentioning St. Louis, and Sabata seemed to know who they were, and figured it out that, why are these acrobats here? Okay, I get it. They bounced up to the window, got in that way, robbed the bank, and it seems like St. Louis comes up quite a bit in a number of these films. I'm not sure what the reason for that is, what the history with St. Louis is and the Old West.
Right. I don't know if it's just like the gateway to the West kind of thing,
Makes perfect sense to me.
But yeah, to your point from earlier, I mean, Stengel being a dandy, it feels very much like he was somebody from out east who's now out there just saying like, look at all these rubes that I can fleece. This is going to be fantastic.
And the other thing that's really fun about the films are all the gadgets, like you've mentioned, and how this, again, from reading the material, is, I believe, the director's nods to 007, and I think he directed some spy films, so that, for me, was the most interesting aspect to these films, other than Lee Van Cleef being able to let go and not be super serious and squinty the whole time. But I loved anticipating what gadget was going to come up next.
Yeah, he's even got like an old record player, and he's playing a voice as he's got this coach going towards these guys with dynamite on it. I think that's in the first one, right?
Yeah, that's the kind of Trojan horse at the end of the film there, where they think he's on the coach and he's sent it in full of dynamite with the little phonograph. Well, I guess it's just a phonograph, the little wax cylinders that they used to use. Those pop up a couple of times throughout the series in the films as well.
The music in this, and we'll talk about music so often during Spaghetti Western Month because so many of these scores are just classic, but the main theme that comes up in here is fantastic. And then even there's that moment, and I know it's not the Phantom of the Opera theme, but that's what I wrote in my notes. But at one point, like that theme from the Phantom of the Opera plays, and suddenly we have like a horror beat inside of here. It was so good.
Threw in a little gothic horror touch for us. Yeah, that was great.
I didn't mention that crazy, it sounds like a plank being hit or something. It's this weird, like, dung noise that plays a couple times. And I'm just like, what the hell is this supposed to represent?
It sounds like the noise that I can't even think of a movie that does this, and I may be making this up entirely. It sounds like the noise to represent a boner, like in a screwball, like a doorstop. And I was like, what in the hell is that?
Which now, anytime I hear that noise, I'm going to refer to it mentally as the boner sting. There are like kind of some oddly, slightly gothic flourishes, so I could see that, especially in the beginning, because the beginning, you have, like, when they're doing the robbery, you have all this, like, it's kind of a stormy night, and you have this gothic music, and which is almost kind of off-putting compared to the rest of the movie, now that I'm thinking about it. There's no boner stings in the beginning.
Well, I guess that fits with the idea that we were talking about before, too, with the death and resurrection of Sabata, because there's at one point it seems like Banjo, who is now being paid by Stengel and his two cronies to kill Sabata, that he kills Sabata and they take him out of town, and then we find out, of course, no, Sabata's not dead, and then he comes back for his revenge and enacts his whole plan. I mean, it's very much like this is all part of the plan. Okay, you're gonna kill me, quote unquote, and then I'll come back and I'll do this and that. So Sabata's like a little bit of a ghost for a bit. So I guess that fits with the gothic idea too.
The style of that third movie, the opening, not maybe gothic, but definitely giallo with the colors and all that. So it's kind of fun when they hit on those different genres in these, because it can be, for me at least, it can get a little bit old with some of the lesser spaghetti westerns where it's just the same thing over and over again. People getting shot and flinging themselves off of a hill or their horse, and can get repetitive. So having those interesting, odd touches really livens up the viewing for me.
You mentioned 007. There's a lot of 007 stuff, especially the gadgets. You know, Heather, you mentioned the gun that can shoot out of the handle rather than just always out of the barrel, which is interesting. Trinity was a Western comedy, but this is a different type of Western comedy. It's almost like Western spy comedy put inside of that. And it's not like anything that I personally had ever seen before. This weird amalgamation. And I think in the wrong hands, it could have been a disaster. But for me, this movie really works.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and a lot of it too is like the cast, like everybody pulls off each role so well, and especially the dynamic between Lee Van Cleef and Ignacio as Carincha. And also, like, I have to mention, I loved Aldo Conti so much in this as Indio, which I guess is maybe not a politically correct term for that character, but you know, come on, if you're wanting political correctness, don't watch Euro Cult, probably from this decade, yeah, whether it's Western or what, but he's so great, and he has such a great physicality, and in this film, he's completely mute, but has a very expressive face. And, kind of researching for this episode, and I was telling Mike a little bit about this earlier, I found out Aldo Conti died in his 40s. He was murdered, and apparently he had dealings with the underworld in Italy, and had a gambling debt. This is speculation because nobody ever found his killers, but basically sort of the going thing, belief is that he had a gambling debt that he had not paid off. And he was found shot in the head in a park.
The only thing I read about him was that he was in the Olympics. Maybe I was reading about a different guy.
That confused me too, because I saw that too, and because he's so physically agile in this, you could easily believe it. But I think the Olympian Aldo Conti was born in the 60s.
Time did not match. I think it had him in like the early 80s, maybe in LA, the 1980, and that would not make sense. So you're probably right. They connected the two erroneously.
It's Wikipedia, so obviously my mileage is going to vary.
You brought up Indio, and I'm just like, who the hell's Indio? And I'm looking, I'm like, oh, Aldo Conti. Oh, okay, he's Alley Cat. So he's probably Indio in like the Italian version, but he's Alley Cat in the English dubbed version. I mean, we just had this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about The Great Silence, where Klaus Kinski is Tigrero in the dub, but or in the Italian, and he's Loco in the English subtitles. So it's just like, okay, which is it? Why doesn't this match? And it's funny that, here we are, Sabata. I don't think they ever say his name in the movie. And there's even a part where, right at the end, where Garincha is like, hey, what's your name? And he's like, oh, didn't I mention it? And he never says it, and he just goes off into the sunset. See you later, stranger.
That kind of makes sense with this whole series, though, of who is Sabata. I mean, he's different in every film, played by a different actor in the second one. And then once you get into the unofficial, the 4, and I believe there's even more than the 4 that we watched. I read at some point that there are like up to 12. And in one of them, I believe the last one released, there's no character named Sabata in that one at all. And I'm like, well, what? So that makes me think about all this stuff, like when studios these days take a script and they go, what are we going to do with this? Well, let's make this the next Die Hard movie. It wasn't written as a Die Hard movie. Or I know this has happened with the Saw franchise as well. I believe the second film was something these 2 other guys that were completely unassociated with the first film wrote, and they said, well, this could be a Saw film, just add a couple more crazy traps, and there you go. And it brings up that sort of cynical part of me, which I really try to avoid when watching these. But you have to look at it like, why did they make the second film a Zapata movie? And they changed it at some point because the characters do, I believe, say Sabata in that film when it's the Yul Brynner character. Just by watching the mouth movement, it really looks like they're saying Sabata and not Indio Black or whatever his name was supposed to be. It brings up this weird confluence of, these forced sequels and existing properties and trying to cash in, and then it also becomes almost like a legend where all these stories people pass around the campfire eventually end up being ascribed to one person. So that's how I ended up looking at them. Like, okay, Sabata is he's a legend in this during this time, and these 3 different people did these wildly different things, and at some point somebody just said, oh yeah, that was Sabata, that was Sabata, that was Sabata. And not even getting into, again, the 4 unofficial ones and how they relate or don't relate to Sabata at all.
I think that's such a cool take on this series of films, and kind of just with certain films, kind of when you have sort of a similar mythos in general, kind of looking at it almost like an urban legend or a campfire tale. That's super cool.
You can't meet him face to face, and you can't turn your back on him. What can you say about Sabata except adios? Adios, Sabata. Yul Brynner as Sabata. Each clip for his sawed-off, lever-action 30-30 contains 7 rimfire Remington cartridges and 1 cigar. Yul Brynner as Sabata. They say you can judge a man by the company he keeps, like Gypsy, when he starts dancing. people start dying. September, every inch a killer, right down to his toes. The gringo, when he went by the book, so did you. The colonel, a marksman who never missed a chance to practice. What can you say about Sabata except adios? Adios, Sabata. It's no wonder he always wears black.
So the second film, directed and co-written by Parolini again, and yeah, it's called Adios Sabata, at least that's how we know it, but the original title was Indio Black, Psyche Titico Set Un Gran Filio di, and then ... which translates, and it's funny because we were making a joke about this before we started recording, Indio Black, you know I tell you, you are a great son of... And that's like the joke is that every time, and it's very, very, Tuco, right? From, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, you know, when he says you're a son of a bitch, but then they have the, come over it, so he doesn't actually say bitch. It's so funny. These movies can be as violent as anybody's business, but they always watch it with the language. Murders galore, but you cannot call someone an asshole or a son of a bitch or anything like this.
Yeah, that really threw me off. And I just gotta say, I love the original titles of all of these films, and I really wish they were presented that way. I mean, we could go, I made a whole list of spaghetti western titles, and they pretty much, and I think you mentioned this on one of your episodes already, Mike, that they kind of rival the audacity and inventiveness of Jolly titles, and they really like to use ellipses a lot. And it's just sort of fun to read those and read the different transcriptions and translations of them. Like I have one that's different from what you said. Indio Black, you know what I'm going to tell you, ... you're a big son of a ... And it's like, man, that's awesome. Just swap out Indio Black for Sabata and keep that amazing title instead of just Adios Sabata.
Well, and with Adios Sabata, you think it's the last one. And so when it's Return of Sabata, I'm like, okay, is that the second one or the third one? It's kind of like Rise of the Planet of the Apes being before Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. And I'm just like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. First there's Dawn, then there's Rise, then there's War. But no, it's Rise, Dawn, War. Okay. Fire whoever came up with that.
Take your damn hands off of me, you dirty son of a ...
Life is cheap. Toilet paper is expensive.
I love that. I love it. I think my other favorite is like, God forgives, I don't.
Have a good funeral, friend. Sartana will pay.
And they smelled the strange, exciting, dangerous scent of dollars. You could just swap out dollars for something kind of sexy or gross in that one, and you have a Jolly title completely. I mean, these are amazing. There are so many good ones.
Well, what's that one? My love is a locked door. I can't even remember what that.
Vice is a locked room, and only I have the key. Something to that effect.
Adios Sabata made me have to go look up the entire history of what Austria was doing in Mexico. It was one of those like, okay, I think I remember that from history class that Austria owned the Mexican territories for a while, but I had completely forgotten about it. And so the whole idea of, Emperor Maximilian and all this, I mean, this movie is steeped in this idea of Austria and Mexico. And so you've got these like Mexican banditos that are going through here. That's kind of a freedom fighters. I mean, there's a great scene where we've got the main villain who's this Austrian Count, is he Colonel Skinner?
Stemmel?
Stemmel. Yeah, so close to the Stendhal that I'm just like, what?
Yeah, I guess it might depend on which version you watched. I believe I watched these all on Screen Picks the first time, and I may have had to watch Adios on what you sent over, and I don't know if it was different on both, but yeah, it depends on who's typing them out, I guess.
Going into this one, I was on such a high from the first one, because it was just so good. I loved all the characters. Within the first 5 minutes of this one, you have a Kenny. Which anybody that's into Gamera movies knows exactly what I'm talking about. When you see a precocious child pop up and you're like, no, please, I don't want a child in this universe. I don't need some annoying. And especially when the monk is trying to tell this boy, we don't need to celebrate violence and their monastery's been attacked. And the kid says, little Juanito says, the Lord is Sabata. And he didn't get slapped because I wasn't raised Catholic, but I've heard legends. I have family that's Catholic about if you get a little too mouthy with certain nuns or priests, you tend to get hit a lot. Southern Baptists aren't much different, for the record, but the Lord is Sabata, which honestly that should have been a title too. What a great title would that be? Sabata as a deity.
Yeah, El Dio es Sabata. I'd like it. That sounds good. So yeah, Skimmel, and I thought he looked familiar, and of course he is the same guy who was the European pistolero in The Big Gun Down. It's funny because in that one he's going against Lee Van Cleef, in this one he's going against Yul Brynner. And I gotta say, Yul Brynner, I like Yul Brynner, but he is being much more of that character from the Magnificent Seven, that kind of loner outsider type of guy where you can't really tell what's going on behind the facade, versus Lee Van Cleef, who seems to be just having a really good time. It doesn't feel like Yul Brynner's having a great time playing this, and for me, it was kind of a letdown, the second one.
Absolutely same. And it breaks my heart to say that because I love Yul Brynner, classic actor, and he has such a great presence. I thought he was bland, honestly, and I never thought in my life I'd ever say the word bland with Yul Brynner, but here I am. And, and I mean, it's not that he sucks or no, he's fine, but it's just, and he does have that great black fringe, tight, he's always showing a lot of chest hair. I mean, I know he has a lot of chest hair, but that thing is low cut for the Wild West. It's just you can tell he's listen, I'm Yul Brynner. I know I look good, ladies. Here are my Brynner pecs. You're welcome. And I respect that. But yeah, it's just, this one, I just felt like this film has some good stuff about it, which we'll go into that I really did love. But Van Cleef is Sabata, he's just, it's just, there's no other person that is going to satisfy this role like Lee Van Cleef. But Brynner's fine. I mean, honestly, after spot watching some of the knockoffs, I was like, I owe you Brynner an apology.
Go back to that one, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he's definitely not as interesting as a character in this, but he's definitely wearing flashier clothes.
And there's weird dotted lines between the first one and the second one. So obviously Sabata, and he's got this kind of interesting gun. This time it's rather than it being a cylinder for his gun, it's this flat line that goes across. And the last one, there's always a cigar in it. So when he's done killing people, he can pull the cigar out, and then he's got that for him. There's this Dean Reed character named Valentine, who I kept thinking was Valentine, and he's kind of the banjo person, but not really. He doesn't play a banjo, but he's just this kind of pain in the ass from Sabata's past, who just keeps coming in, and he's just yeah, I'm gonna fuck over whatever kind of deals you get going here, Sabata. Good luck with that. And then you get Ignacio Spala again as Scudo in this, and he's kind of playing the same role, but a little bit different. But really for me, it's him and Septiembre, who's this guy who he carries around little ball bearings, and he'll drop one into his boot, and then he's got a little cup in the toe of his boot, and then he can whip that thing. It's this hacky sack from hell kind of thing where he can just murder people with these. There's another guy, and I'm trying to remember what his name is, if he's Gitano, but he gets up and he'll dance before someone is murdered. He'll do a flamenco, and he's there was clapping his hands and tapping his feet and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, oh, something bad's going to happen at the end of this dance. Look out. But man, Septiembre, even though he doesn't say anything, he's like the character for me. It's like, all right, cool. He's very much like Alley Cat or Indio, that he doesn't speak, but I'm just like, this guy's got charisma galore, and give me the Septiembre story. I love this guy.
Yeah, he was definitely one of my favorites in that second film.
Sal Borges, I believe is the name of the actor that played him. He just has almost this like silent film kind of quality to his face. Like, he has so much expression in his eyes, and you can just tell there's a lot of depth going on. I totally would have been down for a follow-up that's focused on his origins and everything. He's so great. And also, Hacky Sack of Death should be another spaghetti western title. Or what was it? No, Hacky Sack from Hell. Dean Reed. In my original notes, he reminded me of Eric Bischoff, who, that's a wrestling reference, so if anybody gets that, great, meets Bobby Sherman. And it turns out he was like, I don't know why there isn't a documentary on this guy. He was an American musician and actually was like kind of a pop star in like South America, and then became basically real champion of like communist countries and socialist, and became a very controversial figure over here. Even though he never renounced his U.S. citizenship, he wasn't really, I think, technically an expat. In the 80s, he did some interview where he compared Reagan to Stalin, and he got in trouble for that, which, I mean, he wasn't wrong. For anybody listening that hates it when we get political, you're welcome. But also, at one point, he was, like, jailed, I think, in Italy in the early 70s, and was bailed out by the poet Pablo Neruda. Where is this guy's documentary? I mean, holy cats.
After further investigation, it seems that there are a few documentaries on Dean Reed, including one called American Rebel and another called The Red Elvis.
The only thing disappointing, though, is the flamenco of death is basically, he distracts people with dancing and then, like, Ignacio's character shoots them. I was hoping that his little dancing shoes would shoot out bullets.
Or whip his spurs across somebody's neck at the end. Dean Reed is in another Parolini film that is now on the top of my list called Soto a Chi Toca, and it's got Ignacio in it, it's got Aldo Conti in it, it's got Sal Borghese in it, the Septiembre guy, and of course I can't find it, so I'm going to have to try and track that down some way. A lot of these other ones are on Prime, or this Screen Picks has a lot of spaghetti westerns, but of course this one they don't. So they're all matched up again in another Parolini or Frank Kramer film, which is odd too, because those credits come up and there's Italian names all over the credits. Produced by this guy, music by this guy, and then when they get to the director, they always go with the pseudonym, and I'm like, Frank Kramer, how bland is that?
Yeah, it's funny though with Ballantine, he is a painter. But that seems kind of odd. It's like, especially knowing that Dean Reed's background, like he had legit musical experience, and that there's the whole thing where he keeps having to redo like the villain's portrait because he's like, I don't look happy enough.
Do you ever look happy?
His face is so good, and I love the monocle. I mean, it's such a great touch, and yeah, he does look like he is just the world's angriest man at all times.
And he shoots the peasants that they've jailed or whatever it is. And I thought, what's going on here? And then I caught on and I was like, oh, that's really brutal. The only thing I really know about the Austrian rule of Mexico is that we got Dos Equis out of that, so.
I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis.
There's a great political theme that's going through this whole movie, but Sabata's the weak link in the film, which is weird. Like I would rather have Escudo be the guy who's just like, okay, yeah, I'm going to rally the peasants, and me and Septiembre and the dancer guy, we're going to be the ones that take care of business. Maybe Dean Reed gets in there as well. Cool. But Sabata, you don't really need to be part of this fight, Sabata. It's okay. I mean, he does, in the movie, he is part of the fight, and he, helps out and everything, and great. But yeah, and what kills me is, like you said, is Yul Brynner. I fucking love Yul Brynner, but he's just kind of like a wet blanket in this film.
Especially going from Van Cleef, who's so expressive in the first one, to Brenner, who's just kind of, he almost seems bored, you know? I mean, it's just, I mean, he looks great. It's Yul Brynner. He always looks great. Other than, like, the cigarette gag, which is a great gag, admittedly, like, it just doesn't seem, I don't know, it's just not as much fun. I mean, thank God for, like, the side characters, because that is where the action is, and you really do love them, and you root for them, and it is really cool. You're totally right on the political thing, where the revolutionaries are the heroes, and the bad guys are basically this kind of colonialism sort of thing. But it's just, it breaks my heart. I'm like, man, I don't want a dog on Yul Brynner.
You were talking about the music with Dean Reed, and there is a scene where he plays the piano, and they sort of have a little tete-a-tete with the piano. And then it comes up again, sort of like the line we used to play together in the first one with banjo. And they talk about doing a duet. And so I started going, is this the coding again? Is this the homosexual coding again with their past? And, going for a stretch there. But I don't think they ever sit down and actually played the duet together. Or maybe I'm misremembering. But there is a little bit of musical stylings in there with him.
You're right. I don't know why I forgot that, because now that you said that, I remember that, because at first you're like, oh wow, Sabata's playing the piano, and that guy throws a knife at him, and because there's this blonde guy's being really rude to Ignacio and his crew, calling them pigs, and saying they smell bad, and the dude, Sabata, gets on him, and dude throws a knife. Sabata keeps playing. And I'm just like, man, Lee Van Cleef wouldn't have done that. That's, again, it was between that and a little kid, which I will say this, at least Juanito doesn't pop up a whole lot in this movie, because I was like, if this kid's gonna be a main character, this is gonna be rough. Thankfully he didn't. But he does pop up later on at a saloon? I'm like, what kind of monastery?
Kind of out of nowhere. He's just there again.
You show me a monastery in a cowboy movie, suddenly I'm thinking they're going to get all raped like El Topo.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Yeah. It's like, run. All you nice monks, please. It's not good. This isn't going to end well. The Austrians shooting down the peasants. I think in my notes I literally had said, what is this El Topo? Because most of the violence in these movies is, I mean, there's a lot of it, but it's very, it's not gruesome. It's not really what I would call, it's definitely not peck and paw or anything like that. It's more, especially by the third one, there's not a whole lot of death until more later on. These aren't gruesome movies, but that little scene in the second one was, I mean, it's still not super bloody by any means, but just the visual and the idea of it is so nasty.
Yeah, especially when they're like, oh, let more than one of them go at a time to give the colonel something to really shoot at, because shooting off one at a time is super easy. So let's let a group of them go. Yeah, it's pretty hardcore.
The violence it's almost that cartoony kind of violence where there are some squibs and a little bit of a pin needle of blood in it, but you don't get the buckets of blood and big spraying squibs or anything like that. And I believe in one of the cheaper knockoff films, they don't even bother with squibs. People just get shot and fall down on the ground. But the second one is one that really gets into that, having the stunt guys do flips and flops off of their horses, and like I mentioned earlier, where it becomes very repetitive in the shooting deaths. That's, for me, what made this one drag a little bit.
There's one of those Sabata knockoffs that they are so cheap that every time they show somebody on horseback or on a carriage, they just show them, they show them from the waist up, and you can tell somebody's just shaking whatever set that they're on, because the clouds never move behind them. They're just going back and forth, in a very steady rhythm too. And the guy who's quote unquote driving the carriage just is constantly shaking the reins. I'm just like, what are you doing to those poor horses, dude? It's very much like, hey, look at me, I'm driving, and you just are constantly moving the wheel back and forth.
Yes, I did notice that. Yeah, it's probably the same one, because one of them was very, very obviously cheaply made.
Sabata's back. He's judge, jury, executioner. Sabata's back. He's got his mind on $1 million in gold. And he's got his sights on an Irishman named McKintock. Sabata's back, but he's not alone. He has friends like Bronco, Fionda, Angel, and Clyde. But McKintock has friends too. And they're all after Sabata. Sabata's back. A lot of men would like to see him dead. But legends don't die, especially when they're fast with a gun. Or a knife. Or a fist. The man with the gun sight eyes is back. And he's throwing his weight around, a quarter of an ounce at a time. Sabata's back.
So let's talk about the third one, where we've got Van Cleef coming back, and it's the return of Sabata, Chiuso un'altra volta. So look out another time, another Gianfranco Parolini, also co-written by Renato Izzo, who has been a co-writer on a lot of these, if memory serves. And the circus element, the flipping, the Indio character / alley cat character, and the way that he jumps around, or you got those two tumblers that are helping rob the bank in the first movie. Take that and times it by, 100, 200, 300 maybe? Because this movie literally starts in a circus, even though you think it's very, very 007. It's like the cold open from a 007 film, and then it suddenly changes into, oh, this wasn't real at all. This is a circus act. And it's like, wow, okay, and that's the tone of the movie through the whole thing, is it's very much a circus western. I guess it does remind me of Jodorowsky a little bit more in the terms of like Santa Sangre, which has so much of a circus theme. Here we have the circus in Sabata, and Sabata is just like all about it. Like, oh, cool, yeah, I joined the circus. Fuck you. Here I am. I'm Sabata. And I've got even better gadgets this time.
Can we have this be that the unofficial title is, yeah, I joined the circus. Fuck you. I'm Sabata. And that's like the whole movie title. That would be, oh, this open. Oh my God. I felt like any sort of quibbles I had with Adios melted away within the first few minutes of this one. And I believe Mike, you talk about the circus and the Santa Sangre, and then Mark, you'd mentioned like kind of almost that giallo style lighting, and oh my God, the reds and the greens, everything looks great. It's tense. You're like, yeah. And then fucking clowns come out.
Yes.
What?
What is happening here? Why am I hearing the March of the Marionettes kind of thing going on here? Whatever that famous circus song is, it's like, here you go. We're in the circus, and there's all the trappings.
The song is Entry of the Gladiators by Julius Fuchik.
That opening is great. Probably one of my favorite parts of the whole series, official and unofficial combined. And a lot of it had to do with those touches. The coloring was, and I wish that would come up more, because it can get so bland with the desert landscapes and the dusty landscapes and the towns that are pretty muted in color and kind of run down. And, it's supposed to be the Old West, so I get that, but the Old West wasn't always the Old West. At some point, it was the New West, and buildings were newly painted in bright colors, maybe, and it was a nice splash of color, figuratively and literally, to brighten it up for me.
You're totally nailing why I can be so hot and cold with Westerns in general because, a lot of times, in my experience, people will get a little bit not ambitious with the visuals as far as coloring, but even just like camera angles, the movement. And I mean, even in audios, like there's some great just sort of camera, like some pans, some movements. There's a great sort of like tilting up shot in this one of Sabata, like pulling off like he has a tiny pistol like fitted into the heel of a shoe, which is so cool. And like that angle's so cool. And that's the gift of these three films, and especially this one, is just, they're having a lot of fun giving you a visual presentation that isn't just dust, horses, some dirty buildings, no, you're getting a little more of a visual treat here.
When he's got the one that fits into the palm of his hand, too, there's like this whole thing about a metal, but then he'll like have the metal sometimes over top of this gun, or it'll just be like in his gloves where he can shoot through his gloves at people, and it's like, whoa, this is pretty neat.
Yeah, he buys that early on in the film, and you're like, oh, that's going to come up later on. That little palm pistol. It seems like that would burn your fingers when you were shooting it, but that's just me doing cinema sins again or something. One of the Bowler twins, he and Alley Cat from the earlier film, they both wear those great bowlers throughout. And I didn't realize it because I watched, I think, the knockoffs pretty closely in succession a while back. And I knew I most likely wouldn't watch them again. But I did watch all of the official three twice. And he is the bad guy he's Jim Sparrow in Wanted Sabata, and I didn't even make that connection when I watched Wanted Sabata, but I was like, wait a minute, that guy looks familiar, so I had to do my little thing, and I was like, oh yeah, he's the guy that sets Sabata up and kills everybody to keep raising the bounty on him, and I'm glad he was a hero in this, because I absolutely hated him in that Wanted Sabata film.
Yeah, he's very dastardly in that.
But they were fun together, the two of them, the acrobats in this one.
If memory serves, this one doesn't have as strong as a villain as the other two. Like, this one, he's not really evenly matched with a baddie.
Oh, no. Though I do love the fact that it's the villain in this one, it's the main one is the top McClintock. Their whole thing is like you have this McClintock kind of organization coming in and overtaxing people and, hiring promotion. Like we see Ignacio, and he's got a huge drum that has McClintock on the side of it. And by the way, Ignacio Spalla with the giant drum is amazing. What a great visual. And he pounds it and he's like, good citizens. And there's a great gag later on where something hits it and he immediately just goes into the spiel and then he's like, oh, wait. And there's some great gags in this one. So I kind of like the idea of kind of the bigger scope villain being just like this organization bilking these top people. I mean, we wouldn't know anything about political parties or organizations taking advantage of good people or anything. I'm getting political again. But yeah, I mean, as far individually, he's a little weaker. He does pray a lot. Like, there's definitely this sort of like very kind of like he's religious, but obviously at the end, he's a bad guy and gold trumps everything.
Well, this one has a theme of Irish people as well. Like, I think Banjo might have been coded as Irish in the first movie with his red hair, but they were spending a lot of money on red wigs for this movie because we've got a lot of people sneaking around the town with the red wigs on, which is kind of unfortunate because we know that Irish people were not treated very well in the Old West, and here they're kind of villainous as far as like, I'm skulking around the town in my red wig. You never know who to trust. Waha.
The villains in this didn't work for me as well as the first two. Like, this fella, it took me a while to even clue into that he was supposed to be the baddie of the film because he just seemed more like a lackey. One of the henchmen that would get taken out by their boss for not following through on whatever job they were supposed to do. And I was like, oh yeah, wait. He's supposed to be the bad guy, and his wife is two-timing him with, and now I forget who. Who's the...
Oh, Clyde?
Yes, Clyde. Oh, Clyde. Yeah, how could I forget? The Matthew McConaughey of this movie. And then also trying to, everybody's trying to get the gold. And is there a reason why it's always gold dust in these movies and not gold bars? Is that era correct or just out of necessity. It's odd to be carrying around bags of gold dust that can get broken and leak out like they do in the second movie. It leaks out all across the road as Valentine's trying to leave.
I wondered the same thing. I was like, that seems like a very, very bad idea.
There's got to be a smithy in town that could melt that stuff down into bars, right?
You would think. I mean, I would be cooking it over the campfire or something. Yeah, you talking about how weak the bad guy was, it totally reminded me, I forgot to bring up that Marco Zuanelli is in the first movie as this guy Sharky, who it seems like he's going to be a threat, and then they hire him to kill Sabata, and then it gets killed almost immediately. But I just wanted to bring him up because he is one of those familiar Western, spaghetti Western faces, because he plays Wobbles in the Once Upon a Time in the West, who is a fantastic character. He's the guy that Henry Fonda shoots, and he's got both a belt and suspenders on, and he gives the line of like, how the hell can you trust him when he can't even trust his own pants? And John Bartha also shows up. He was the sheriff in Daughtry City in the first movie, and now he's back as the sheriff in this one. But again, I don't think he's supposed to be the same character either.
Yeah. It's always a different town, and that's when things start to get really confusing, and even though you see a familiar face. But you mentioned that, and that was one thing I wanted to talk about from the first film, is that they keep upping the ante to pay off the people to kill Sabata, even up to the amount that they originally stole. And I just thought that was hysterical. And of course, it doesn't work out. And
yeah, we'll pay $100,000 to kill this guy when he only wants $60,000. Yeah.
And then it ends up blowing away in the air at the end anyway, so.
I love how, like, kind of the circus keeps coming up. Like, not so much visually, but it's like at one point when Sabata's talking with McClintock, he puts on this little cylinder, and it's that music, that do-do-do-do, and the phrase, the show's over, gets looped. And I love the twist that, because early on, it's almost like, what is Sabata doing at a circus? It's almost like, is he fallen kind of on hard times? But then it's kind of slowly revealed that basically there's a counterfeit guy working within the company, and Sabata's trailing him and joins the circus to keep an eye on him. And so it all pays off. Also, the counterfeiter has the name of Pickles.
Charlene! Mary! Pickles!
Pickles, the name kept coming up. I thought, do I know who Pickles is? Am I supposed to know who this guy is? Did they show him?
I don't know if they ever do.
At the end, they show his corpse, and then I was like, well, I don't recognize him. It's one of those things that loses me in movies, and this is just a me problem where names are brought up, and if the character hasn't been shown or I can't associate it with someone, I get completely lost. I mean, that's why I didn't enjoy Miller's Crossing the first couple of times I watched it, because they talk about a lot of people who aren't in the scene, and it took me forever to realize that Steve Buscemi was Mink in that movie. So that kind of tells you how my brain works. Like, who's Pickles?
Pickles, and I could be wrong because I too got kind of confused over like who is this Pickles? But there's that scene where there's a guy with white hair that two of the McClintock henchmen are kind of roughing up, and they take his watch. Like he's in like kind of a gray cell. I think that was Pickles.
Okay, that makes sense.
Again, as I told you guys in an email earlier, there were a few characters in my initial notes where I wrote somebody as maybe Mayor.
Yeah.
So yeah, some of the characters, there's a little more guesswork over their titles and names and stuff.
Yeah, like they refer to Clyde as lieutenant a few times, and Sabata as major. So again, I'm going back to like, okay, were these guys in the war together? And again, did they serve on the same side? I'm guessing they did, but yeah, this time Clyde, this Rainer Schörner character, is very much that, hey, I'm the fly in the ointment. I'm going to fuck up your plans, Sabata. That constant character was just like, man, you need better friends, Sabata.
There's kind of a loose illusion that they fought for the South, that it was the Civil War, and which is something I don't think you would probably see in the States. In an American Western, having the good guy, the hero, the titular hero at that, be fighting for the South, probably for obvious reasons. For very obvious reasons. Reiner, he's a good little shit. Again, I was missing Banjo. I mean, Banjo's got the pants, the swagger. a literal banjo, but he's a good kind of like good-looking, heelish. Fly in the Ointment's, I think, the perfect descriptor.
Yeah, I liked him, actually. He was my favorite of the frenemies in the films. And part of it was, I'm like, who is he reminding me of? And then I thought, oh yeah, this is the Matthew McConaughey character. Even whoever dubbed him, at least in the version I watched, kind of had that little thing with the ashes like that. Yeah, and I thought, oh, great. I'm not a big McConaughey fan, but it just kind of tickled me that's what he brought to mind.
Also, this was the sauciest of the three, in my opinion. There was a lot of like cleavage, and there's this whole thing where Sabata's getting it on with this beautiful showgirl,
first time
/ prostitute. Yeah,
I think it's the
Maggie.
first time he gets it on in these.
Because sex kind of exists in the other two, but definitely not for Sabata. But this one was definitely like, you even have this character of this sort of like nebbish guy that nervously goes into like the saloon, and he's there every day, but he's afraid to talk to the girls, and then he ends up like grabbing one of their boobs. Like, I don't know, it was. But we can't say son of a bitch.
And this is the one where that wonderful theme song plays. We finally get a theme for him.
That theme song is crazy when they start talking about how he's the 9-fingered man, and I had to look up to hear that part of one of his fingers, like Lee Van Cleef's actual fingers, is missing from, what was it, like something crazy, like putting together playground equipment for his daughter or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's right.
I've seen the picture of his missing finger, and it is literally the tip of his middle finger. Calling him a 9-finger man is taking it a little bit far. I mean, I don't think you'd miss it, really. My cousin lost a tip of his finger in a lawnmower, and you don't ever even really, can't even tell, but it's kind of funny that weaves its way into the song. Because it doesn't come up in the film itself. It's not a plot point that, he wouldn't be able to fire his guns or something,
or they identify him through his missing finger. Right. Like, who was it, ma'am? Oh, he was a 9-fingered man. Oh, okay.
Wow. Now that you say that, it's weird because not so much in this one, but how Yul Brynner dresses in Adios is a lot like how Tony Iommi in Black Sabbath dresses.
Oh, yeah. I can see that, especially with the fringe.
And he is missing the tip, yeah.
Thinking about the saloon / whorehouses in the film, and it seems like there's one in each one of these. There's something again from the first one that I just wanted to point out real quickly. When Sabata is in his room, and this is a scene that gets repeated in at least 2 of these films, where the bad guys are going to come up to his room and take care of him. And in that one, he does this trick where he hides behind a picture frame.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. Yes.
They walk in and you see, the camera pans past him and you see him in there with his hand up to his chin. And that for me was the biggest laugh out of all 7 of these movies that we've watched. I was like, that is so amazingly brilliant. I just absolutely loved it. And I just had to get that in there because that's one of my favorite parts of all of these movies.
I'm so glad you brought that up. But yeah, I laughed out loud when that happened. And then it's like, it's a mirror as well. Like they see the reflection in the mirror, but he's actually in the frame across the room. It's like, what is going on? But it was so good.
A scene that made me laugh out loud is in one of the standoffs, they're showing all these various guys that are going to, have the shootout with Sabata, and there's like this Jew's harp. At one point, I swear, it sounded like they made the instrument go, uh-oh. It was like boing, boing, like boing, boing, like that almost. And I was like, what the which is a ridiculous. I mean, anytime I hear that instrument, it just makes me laugh. It's like my husband Chuck pointed out, it's used in Godzilla versus the Smog Monster. And it's equally funny in that, too, when you hear it. You're like, what? Like, what is
Yeah, I've never really heard like a very, sedate symphony or something with a Jew's harp in it.
It doesn't have the most dignity as far as musical instruments.
It harkens back to the boner sound.
Yes, yes.
They're definitely adjacent. Did this film, inexplicably, apparently was listed in Michael Medved's 1978 book, The 50 Worst Films of All Time?
Are you totally deranged?
Are you serious? I was like, this is a great movie. I'm like, Any more reason, that guy already, we all know is a chode. Anybody who's done film writing or just film lover, if you've read any of his stuff, this guy was like the hot take king at his day. And there's always gonna be that one film critic that says things like, that's the worst film of all time. And it's like, really that? Like, have you seen movies? How many movies have you seen if you think this is bad? Like, inexplicable. Obviously he didn't see any of the knockoffs, but this film is so much fun. The first one I think is still cohesively the best, but Return to Sabata is just, it's a fun house ride, and damn it, it's Lee Van Cleef. You cannot touch this guy.
Yeah, I like that they bring back the gag at the beginning with the guy getting shot in the face, and in this one it's Sabata getting shot in the face, and so again we have this resurrection kind of thing. And I think, the Clyde character, he seems to be much more of an ally than Banjo, at least in this end part where it's just like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the one that shoots you in the face, and then, you'll come back and I'll get shot and that will be fake and all this kind of stuff. So I like that, and I like that they're doing this whole thing in order to find out where this guy's stashing the gold, and that it's all up in this chimney, and they find this little lever that tricks it out, and it's like a giant jackpot of all this gold coming down. It is a little strange that it's all about the gold. I mean, it's very much a Western trope of like, where's the gold? But you're just coming back from the Mexican Revolution kind of a thing.
Well, at least they were gold coins this time and not gold dust, because that would have been hell to clean up.
They'd be choking in there and coughing up gold for weeks, blowing their nose, and they got gold dust in it, and it's like, now I gotta take this to the smithy.
Oh god, it's like that. I don't know if you guys ever watched Chappelle's show, but he had like a skit about MTV Cribs where a guy was like grinding gold or diamonds into his omelet so his dookie would sparkle. And that's where my brain goes to with this. You'd have it's like when a cat eats tinsel,
I do like that he still tries to screw Sabata over at the end. They've been in cahoots, and he's got to try a couple more times to put one over on Sabata and not pay off that $5,000 he owes him.
Yeah, it's not as good as the first one, but I'd have to say, 1-3-2 is definitely the preferred strength of these films.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's how they came out on my scaling.
So let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll be right back after these brief messages.
Sick of those trivia podcasts that you don't even understand how to operate, and they just have too many levers and buttons?
There's got to be a better way.
Now there is, with Good Job Brain, an offbeat quiz show and trivia podcast that makes learning new things easy and fun.
I just learned that artificial vanilla flavoring sometimes comes from the anal glands of a beaver, and now I can never shake that mental image. Thanks, Good Job Brain.
Good Job Brain is available for the low price of just 4 easy payments of free. It's a podcast.
Good Job Brain is part of Airwave Media and available on all podcast apps. Operators are standing by.
Join me, Jamie Benning, on the Filmumentaries podcast, particularly if you enjoy stories like designer Nilo Rodis Jamiro convincing George Lucas to push him around to help gain the support of his crew on the ailing Howard the Duck.
Blam! The door opens, it's George. Everybody gasps. George makes a beeline to me. I'm literally back against the wall.
Or hear puppeteer Tim Rose's emotional story behind that iconic Admiral Akbar shot in Return of the Jedi.
I believe that war is something to be proud of, but not to celebrate.
Or how Star Wars editor Paul Hirsch tackled cutting so many successful films.
The thing that I learned from working with De Palma is that tension depends on a clock. You need to have the sense that time is running out.
Maybe Oscar-winning sound designer Mark Mangini's insightful chat about his work on Blade Runner 2049.
Not a single sound from the original Blade Runner in the new film. A great deal of inspiration.
That's the Filmumentaries podcast with me, Jamie Benning.
From page to screen. So they have 9 times out of 10 they have to send it back to you unopened or just throw it in the garbage can.
Things don't always look exactly as we envision our life to look, but sometimes it works out and turns out even better.
Gregor Fisher, his bacon number is 2 because he was appeared with January Jones in Love Actually, and January Jones and Kevin Bacon appeared in X-Men First Class together.
I've got to say, the very Harold and Kumar 3D Christmas, now that
just makes me want to rush out.
It's about the acting, about the writing. That's really what theatre is for me.
Probably had more names than Prince or whatever. Never mind, there's a joke for the oldies. It'd be like, who's Prince? Who's he? I'd just like to see Mr. Freeze hiring his bad guys going, right, okay, so you're a psycho, right, can you ice skate? Head over to iTunes, Spreaker and Stitcher and put in the search box From Page to Screen.
Hi, this is Andrew from We Hate Movies, and you're listening to The Projection Booth. If you feel like laughing after listening to some serious film discussion, head on over to our show, WHMPodcast.com. Every Tuesday, a new episode drops, us ragging on bad movies, whereas the good folks here at The Projection Booth are talking about good, party, cinema-related stuff. Go here for the cinema, come to us for the laughs afterwards. We Hate Movies every Tuesday.
The third important character in this picture would, of course, have to be a woman. An untamable wildcat, she managed to further complicate the already difficult situation of our heroes.
You dirty bandit. Now you just take me right back to my hotel.
Just what are you laughing at? Didn't you hear? Mr. Miller is a very, very important man. And a vicious killer.
Yet another killer, the terrible Sabata. Shootouts. The tricks of Leon Pompero and the courage of Steve McGowan are useless against this infamous bounty hunter. Dig your grave, friend. It is coming. And here he is. This is where the bloodbath begins.
Mr. Steve McGowan, Leon Pompero. They want you in Tombstone. We'll travel together.
Senor Cockroach, I mean Senor Sabata. The way I stink, you don't want to travel with me? Okay. Up they go.
You ever what? You weave a web and then...
They fell into the spider's web.
So again we find ourselves face to face. Right, Stiller. You just hurt your hand. What do you think it'll get you beating me?
It's been a long time since I played this, but it's a cute little game. While you turn, I shoot. The bullets are supposed to hit the spokes. Now, as you know, I'm a pretty good shot, but it's always, let's say, possible to miss.
I'm not quite sure I want to play. But you will, and should he miss, you'll see that we don't talk, because we know that you are a murderer. I'll teach you.
With 6 horses and a woman, forged the strong friendship between two men as different as this legendary as Steve McGowan and Leon Pompero.
I told you it was a trap, Leon. You forgot all about that.
McGowan, you ain't got much ammunition. I'll spare you and the Mexican if you hand the girl over to us.
Don't listen, Steve. He's a big liar. I'd be happy to sacrifice myself to Miller.
I have a proposition, Pistolero. Make it. Man to man, we'll fight it out between the two of us. The girl will be prize. If you want her so damn bad, you're gonna have to kill me for her. Good idea, McGowan.
No, Steve. Don't step out. Sabata will trick you.
All right, we are back, and we're talking about Sabata, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the unofficial Sabata films. So I didn't watch The Grand Duel, which I've wanted to watch that movie for years. It's from 1972, and it stars Lee Van Cleef, and it was released sometimes under a Sabata title, so it's out there, but there were a few that were released somewhat Sabata titles. I mean, we'll talk about some of these titles as we go along. So I guess let's talk first about Wanted Sabata. That one I only could find under the title Sabato, Dead or Alive, so it feels like it was released as a Sabata film, which is really strange because this Sabata is not like any other Sabata insofar as he's pretty weak. He gets framed for murder in here, and he's on the run through the whole movie, which just does not fit the Sabata character whatsoever.
Yeah, I had a hard time with a number of these trying to figure out who was supposed to be the Sabata character, and this one was sort of interesting. What I guess I got, again, confused, which seems to be my go-to. I'm like, why is this guy going through all of this trouble? And I figured, okay, he sets Sabata up, poisons the livestock's water to set Sabata up, but then he helps him escape. I'm assuming they don't show who helps him escape, but it made sense to me later that it was him, so that Sabata would be on the run and that he could go after him and kill everybody else that was after him to increase the bounty, to get the bounty high, and then he would kill Sabata finally and collect the bounty. I mean, that's what I took from it because I couldn't make sense of it any other way.
Of all the people that you don't want to chase down, I would think Sabata would be the guy. But in this one, I don't remember him using any gadgets. I mean, the camera work is pretty just like, okay, yeah, this is happening. This is a movie, but it's nothing where you're just like, oh, wow, look at this. This is, thrilling kind of stuff. It was just, it's like this would be a decent spaghetti western, but as a Sabata film, it's weak sauce.
I feel so rewarded. This is literally all of my notes. Angry guys arguing in Italian, I can't. That's what I wrote. I could not get engaged with this one at all. Again, maybe it's one of those things where, like, if it was divorced from Sabata, if one was to approach it just as a regular spaghetti western, maybe it would fare better. But I just...
That guy was so bland, though. The Sabata character, and I'm trying to look up his name right now, and I think he's American. Brad Harris. So he's one of those guys that, was a football star or something, and then ended up being in probably Sword and Sandal and spaghetti western films, and he is just so bland in this. That was what really killed it for me, beside being confused as to what exactly was going on or why this guy freed him, got him captured, freed him, and then, kept killing everybody that was going after him. Yeah, it was kind of a drag.
The next two films, there was one from 70, Arriva Sabata, which is not translated properly, but it's known as Sabata the Killer. That one fit to me as that and Dig Your Grave Friend, Sabata's Coming, which was Abre tu fosa amigo, llega Sabata. Those two films feel like they go together for me, and I don't know, I guess it's just the Fernando Sancho character who really kind of pulls the films together, but again, it's one of these, is this the same character? I don't think that it is. He's got a different name in both of them, and in one, he's got 10 children, and the other, he's got 14, but then again, a couple of years have passed. I mean, they're really playing into the dirty Mexican stereotype, which is tough at times to be like, okay, yeah, it's kind of funny, but at the same time, like we just, Sabata just about killed a guy for calling somebody a stinky Mexican, and so this is very much that same thing. Anthony Stephan as Sabata in Sabata the Killer, and Ruf Baldassare as Sabata in the Dig Your Grave Friend. But in Dig Your Grave Friend, Sabata's the bad guy, which is really kind of strange. Suddenly he goes from good guy to he's the guy that they're avoiding, in that way, he's barely in the movie. He just shows up and chases our guys away. The Richard Harrison, C. McGowan character and the Fernando Sancho, Leon Pampero character, they're on the run from this guy, and they kind of make him into a joke at times. They pull the wool over his eyes several times.
Well, and it's such a waste of Richard Harrison. If anybody's ever seen the amazing Bruceploitation film, Challenge of the Tiger, Richard Harrison plays this guy, Dick Cannon, and he is like the suavest mofo. He has his estate has topless girls playing tennis for no reason other than be topless and playing tennis. And it's just, he's got the stash. He's the man. You're like, oh, I love Richard Harrison. And then here it just seems like it's kind of, and I don't think it's his fault. I think, he's fine. Yeah, it's just it's kind of a weaker Richard Harrison. And yeah, the Mexican stereotypes Especially in Dig Your Grave. When something reminds you of the music video for Genesis' Illegal Alien, that ain't good. It's not a good look. And oh god, and I hate that song. And so I was even more mad. I'm like, great, now this is racist, I'm offensive, but then it also makes me wow, racist and reminded me of a horrible Genesis song. Thanks, movie.
I'm sorry, I misspoke, because to me, the two that go together are Dig Your Grave, Friend, Sabata's Coming, and Watch Out, Gringo, Sabata Will Return. Those are the ones that have the same Mexican character, because Sabata the Killer, that's the one, and I'll just say it this way so you guys know which one I'm talking about. It's the one with the two dudes, the Mexican in the car. That's the one, that's Sabata the Killer, which stands out to me as completely different, and I'm surprised that one had Sabata in the name of it at all, and it's just like, what the hell's going on in here? And then to have a car and all this, it just felt so bizarre. The only thing I liked about it, so it's Sabata and this Mexican bank robber named Mangosta. Mangosta, the guy that plays him, has a fucking killer face, and I want to see more movies with this guy, and I'm pretty sure he was in one of I think he's in the original Django films as maybe the sheriff or the mayor. So he's got this great look to him. So Sabata the Killer sticks out like a sore thumb. And ironically, Dig Your Grave, Friend, Sabata's Coming, and Watch Out, Gringo, Sabata Will Return fit together for me, even though the original title of Watch Out, Gringo is Judas Tomas Tus Monedas, which is Judas Take Your Money. So there's no Sabata in the title at all with that one. And I don't even think there's a character named Sabata in the film.
That's the one without the Sabata character, which I was just like, okay, why am I watching this one?
What did you do to me, Mike? What are you doing?
I have to go back to this name, Dick Cannon, that we just completely washed over. And
seriously, oh my gosh.
If you don't insert that boner sound after she says that name, Mike, you
please
ruin this whole episode.
Dick Cannon. And also that film features a scene where Bruce, that's the thing with Bruceploitation. I get confused, kind of like with these knockoffs, like how to pronounce it, because they're all variations of things. But he fights a bull, and luckily it doesn't look like like a real bull was killed, at least as far as I can tell. But it's not like Cannibal Holocaust or anything. But yeah, I mean, Dick Cannon, come on, he's got the mustache of a Dick Cannon too. You see a man with that smirk and that mustache, he is swimming in trim. Unlike the non-Sabata in Watch Out, Gringo, Sabata Will Return. I did think that the cinematography was better in this one than in some of the other knockoffs, and it did give the phrase necktie party referring to hangings. I thought that was creative.
The Mexican stereotyping, that just really put me off of those two, and now I've gotten so confused as to which ones are which, but whichever had the same actor as different characters. And I thought, like I mentioned to you, Mike, that I just kept thinking of Mel Blanc doing his Mexican characters in the Speedy Zapatos cartoons. They didn't hit it like that in the official trilogy with the Carincha, Escudo, and whatever his name was in the third one. They didn't go that hard.
Bronco,
yeah. You could see that could have been a possibility, and of course that's all up to the dubbing and going that route. They didn't have to go that route. And again, that kind of brings up that question for me of how much of this was scripted and how much of this did whoever was distributing this in America add to the characterization of those guys. Because I think it was on the episode for Crumbs and Jesus Shows You the Way to the Highway when you spoke to Miguel Yanzo, he was like, the script doesn't really matter when you're going to dub all this stuff. You can keep changing it however much you want, and the characters can say what they want. And so it just makes me curious to know if that really stereotyped characterization was in the films originally.
Do you actually go like, oh, well, I've got to put on a Mexican accent for this character and then just lay it on as thick as possible because otherwise it gets lost? You know, if you're slightly Mexican, or people are like, well, that guy looks like a Mexican character, but you're barely doing an accent, or I can't even tell. So you just like, yeah, Speedy Gonzales it up. So you're just like,
okay, muchachos, he's gone. Everybody go to work. We got to get ready for the party.
The way they refer to the characters that he plays in this, it's Greaser, and, you know, which is way more contemporary slander towards that. So it just is like, really, guys? I mean, you're hitting the lowest common denominator here. It's not necessary. I get that we're in the South. We're near the Mexican border more likely than not. And in all these films, there are Mexican characters. But this seemed like it was the first time where they were really kind of going to that level.
Don't cry in front of the Mexicans.
Yeah, I mean, because really the closest in the three is, I mean, the, you know, Angel's in the third one. Man, it does get confusing. Where Aldo Conti, like, Alley Cat is also alternately referred to as Indio, but it's not really used derogatively. Like, he's a hero. He's this total, like, stoic, super agile badass that you really love. So, I mean, yeah, that was kind of, I think, something very refreshing about those three, is that you kind of, especially with the Western genre, especially with American ones, you kind of brace yourself, you know, you're going to see some things that haven't dated well, but I don't think you really had a whole lot of those original ones. Yeah, the Mexican stereotype was rough in a lot of these knockoffs. It was just, and I think all of us, I mean, we're all film fans. There's a lot of stuff we can enjoy and love that hasn't aged well, certainly. In fact, one would probably argue like 80% of my favorite films probably fall somewhere into that half the time. But even for that, yeah, it's a bit much.
Yeah, and at least they never had Indio or someone say to Indio, you know, smoke 'em peace pipe or something silly like that. I mean, it's barely even, I wouldn't even associate him as Native American really, other than his hair and outfit. It just doesn't come up, and there's no reason for it to, really.
Sabata never treats him any differently because of that, as opposed to, even in Sabata the Killer, there's a little bit of like, you know, oh yeah, he's my Mexican friend. That old Prejudice commercial.
Yesterday Jimmy said I was prejudiced.
Do you know what prejudice is?
No.
Well, prejudice is when you react to someone because of their religion or their color.
But I don't do that.
Who is Jimmy?
Jimmy's one of my Jewish friends.
Then you are prejudiced because you think of Jimmy as your Jewish friend and not your friend.
Who told you that word? Oh, Eduardo Fajardo. He's my Mexican friend.
I have to point this out just because I get a kick when this shows up in movies and it has no real connection to my hometown. But they do mention the Fresno fountain in Dig Your Grave, Friend, and my ears always perk up when I hear that word in movies. So
these 4 films would be okay as, again, just Westerns, but as Sabata films, no. It's not the character whatsoever. I would probably rewatch Watch Out Gringo, Sabata Will Return, and Dig Your Grave, Friend, Sabata's Coming, but Sabata the Killer and Juan Sabata, I'm okay if I never watch those 2 again.
The Dig Your Grave Friend, and I may be confusing them. I put them in, when I watched them, I think I put them in order of release, and I want to say the third one I watched, which appears to be Dig Your Grave Friend, seemed to me my least favorite, and part of it had to do with it felt like the music was kind of like library music, and there were really abrupt cuts between scenes where they like took the needle off the record and then and put down another one on a different record, and it was just kind of like and I don't think the image was as good on that, which, you know, is just something that happens when you're trying to source out all these films. But I don't know which ones I'd watch again. I'm trying to think of what had the most interesting stuff in it. Like, we're missing gadgets. We're missing some of the fun. Some of them were kind of dour. And except for the one with the car, that seemed a little bit on the goofier side. But yeah, I'd be hard pressed to return to any of these.
Dig Your Grave, Friend, Sabata is Coming. I think the version of that I watched was actually like a fan dub / fan edit of it, because every once in a while they would be speaking English, then suddenly they jump to,
right.
I don't know
German.
if it was Italian or Spanish. Okay, German. I know there was one where they'd go to German. Yeah. Yeah, I for sure. The last one was very German because the title came up in German and it ended with the German word for end. But then, yeah, there was at least one where they would jump into Italian, and it would be just like weird, like one-off shots, just like, oh, here's a shot of the Sabata character, and he'd be like, see, or whatever, and I'm like, okay, why was that not in the English version of this film? Like, did you trim that, or is it just missing from it? Like how you're talking about how there's abrupt cuts and just the music turning off, some of it is because these things are not preserved and they look like garbage. There was at least one of them that I watched where I was just like, wow, this is not even pan and scan. It's basically just whatever's off the side of the frames is off the side of the frames. You just get the middle part of it. So good luck.
Yeah. Oh, and I remembered, I think we had an issue with a couple of them being undubbed and or unsubtitled. So I know you had to track down different versions. So that's probably what led to these kind of chopped up versions. And that always makes me think of the Italian horror movies where all of a sudden the scenes that were cut for American release or maybe even British release are just all in dubbed Italian and there's no subtitles or anything. And you're like, okay, well, that scene was obviously cut from our prints, and I just don't get to know what they're saying, and that's fine because it's usually just dialogue scenes that end up getting cut like that. They're not cutting the gore and the sex necessarily, or in these cases, they're not cutting out the shootouts. It's, let's speed up the pace a little bit on these films and get rid of some of the talking.
Yeah, so many strange versions of these. And yeah, what you're saying totally reminds me of like Deep Red, I think it was, where it was just like the scene where the psychic is talking is half of it's in Italian, half of it's in English, or like Four Flies on Grey Velvet. I don't think I've ever seen a decent version of that. It's always where they will speak many languages because it's been culled together from all these different sources. I'm sure there's a better version out there by now, but back when I was on a Argento kick, when we were doing a bunch of Argentos on the show, yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, there's scenes like that in Phenomena, which is one of the few movies that I know, as when I watched it as Creepers as a kid, I knew like, oh yeah, this is a different version. A lot of times I didn't catch that when I was younger, but yeah, you watch that and it's Jennifer Connelly being dubbed over in Italian in certain scenes, and I'm like, okay, this was some of the stuff that was cut out, and
I mean, it's almost a nice, like, flag for you where it's like, oh, okay, I'm seeing what's different. Like when I saw Metropolis and it's like, all of a sudden it's the print that's beat to hell. And it's like, oh, this is the one that they rescued from like a Brazilian film vault or whatever. So it's like, oh, this is interesting as a comparison tool. But at the same time, I'd like there to be a really beautiful print of this that's pristine throughout.
I do appreciate being able to tell the difference, actually, because that whole idea of different versions of films is something that drives me absolutely crazy. Like, what's the definitive version of these films that just got hacked to pieces depending on the region that they were played in? And we cut this stuff out in America because we don't want a bunch of talking. We cut this stuff out in England because of the gore and violence. In Germany because of this, and in Asian countries because of this, and then it just becomes this thing where you get a disc from whoever's releasing these film, and there's 5 different versions of the movie, and I'm like, I can't watch this movie 5 times, even though I like it. I don't want to do that.
Well, and especially you're like, what was different? Oh, there was one shot for 1 second. It was a horse that fell, and the British didn't like the violence. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, sometimes I think they should call these Swiss cheese westerns. All right, guys, we're going to take another break and play a preview for next week's show.
A golden bullet. When the bullet turns red, the general will be dead.
Chuncho, the bandit. El Nino, the gringo. Side by side, they killed for what they believed in. Gold. El Santo, the Holy One. What the Lord giveth, he took away. Adelita, the woman. She gave aid and comfort to the enemy, then blasted him to pieces. The general, he needed many guns. He got one bullet. A golden bullet. A bullet for the general.
That's right, Spaghetti Western Month concludes with a look at A Bullet for the General. Until then, I want to thank this week's co-host, Heather and Mark. So, Mark, what is the latest with you, sir?
Well, since we're still stuck at home, kind of, for the most part here, I'm operating under the Smooth Brain Initiative and don't have much set up in the way of shows. I just am flying by the seat of my pants. About the only new thing I've got going on is I've got some swag up at TeePublic now. So if anybody's interested in getting a shirt with my logo on it, you can go to my website and track that down. But that's about it. I'm just releasing stuff here and there and trying to rope my daughter into recording episodes and things like that. So hopefully the world will get back to normal, or my world will get back to normal soon.
I have my Wake Up Heavy shirt on order. Should be arriving this week. And Heather, what's new with you?
Well, I recently wrote about the 2020 independent film, Brandon Colvin's A Dim Valley, which delves into the sensual and magical world of botanists. You can read this and more of my work over at diabolicmagazine.com.
And Heather, I was very happy to see a new a new issue of your newsletter come out. That was great. Always enjoy that.
Oh, thank you. And if anybody's interested, as the Mondo Heather newsletter, pluggy McPlug. And if you're interested, you can send me your email address over to my email address, which is heathermariedrain@gmail.com, and I'll get you on the list.
Well, thank you so much, folks, for being on the show. Thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks especially to our Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projection booth. Every donation we get helps the projection booth take over the world.
Invincible man in the countryside. So you got your life, he lets you go. Sabata, the fastest gun in the West, four-barrel Dillinger. He's the only invincible man in the countryside. Sabata, 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 Sabata. Invincible man in the countryside. So you got your life, he lets you go. The fastest gun in the West, four-barrel Dillinger. He's the only invincible man in the countryside. Sabata, 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 Sabata.
Made it to the end of this episode of The Projection Booth. And as the end credits roll, we wanted to thank you, the listening audience. Here at the Projection Booth podcast with Mike White, host extraordinaire, bang.